Thank you all so much for joining us today, wherever you are. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. My name is Margaret Okada-Sheck. I'm the Associate Director of Admissions here at Harvard Divinity School, and I'm absolutely thrilled to be able to introduce my colleague, Beth Flaherty, who is the Director of Financial Aid here at Harvard Divinity School. So without further ado, I'm going to let Beth take it away. Thanks so much.
Hi, everyone. It's so nice to join you here today. Again, my name is Beth Flaherty, and I'm the Director of Financial Aid here at HDS. And the purpose of today's session is really just to do some question and answer with all of you, answer some questions that you've already submitted that you have questions about, and then also to give you an opportunity through the presentation to ask some more questions. So if something does come up for you, please put it in the Q&A. And I will address as many questions as I can as we go through this. It's not going to be a formal presentation. I don't have a PowerPoint for you, but I do have a couple of questions that have been sent in already. And so I thought it would be best to start with those. And then we'll be able to address hopefully some more questions that come up. So the first question that we got was asking about the grant and scholarship aid that we offer to students and what's our basic financial aid policy. So we have other presentations that are actually up on the admissions website, I believe, that talk in a little bit more specifics about the whole process for applying for aid and also what our programs are. So I'm just going to do the Reader's Digest version and give you a basic idea of what our grant programs are. So, and it's also important to note that we offer institutional grant support for just the MTS and the MDiv program. We do not offer grant aid, institutional grant aid for the MRPL or the THM program. So when I'm talking about grant aid, I'm strictly referring to the MTS and the MDiv. We have two grant aid programs. We have the smaller merit-based grant program and our larger need-based grant program. In the merit-based grant, essentially every student that applies for admissions will be considered for a merit-based award. But it's important to note that only a small percentage of students, usually about 10% of the admitted class, will end up with a merit award. Merit awards are, there's no application required, so you don't apply, you're chosen by the admissions committee. The financial aid committee is not part of that, and you don't have to apply for need-based aid in order to be considered for merit-based aid, and those decisions will be made at the time of admission. So if you're offered in a merit-based award, you'll get that notification along with your award letter in mid-March. As I said, it's the smaller grant pool, so we always like to encourage people to hope for merit, but plan for need-based aid. And if you are offered a merit award, those awards include a full tuition grant, so it will cover your full-time tuition, and a stipend ranging anywhere from $12,000 to $20,000, depending upon the type of merit award you've been chosen for. And the stipends actually come directly to the students on a monthly basis to help you with your living expenses. What our grants and stipends don't cover is they do not cover your health fees or your student activity fees. And they, even if you do get a stipend, it's not going to cover all of your living expenses, but it certainly will go a long ways towards helping with that. The need-based program is the larger program, and that does require an application. The due date for applying for need-based financial aid is February 9th, 2023. And what happens is in usually early January, early to mid-January, once everyone has submitted their applications for admissions, we will go ahead and send out an email to students who did apply and send them the link for applying for need-based aid and the application instructions. So if you are a U.S. citizen or an eligible non-citizen, and that generally means that you're a permanent resident, you will fill out the HDS institutional application for aid, as well as the FAFSA, which is the free application for federal student aid, and many of you are familiar with that. The FAFSA is required for need-based aid for domestic students, so U.S. citizens and eligible non-citizens. If you are an international student or an undocumented student, you will simply just fill out the HDS application for aid. You will not fill out the FAFSA. In determining need-based aid, we're looking at all of the information that you fill out on the FAFSA and or the HDS institutional application. And we're looking at a myriad of different factors. So the most popular question I get is, how can I know in advance what I'm going to get awarded for aid? And the truth is that we can't tell you. We have to wait and see where everything lands, and we have to look at all the information. But know that we do a really comprehensive review of your application, and we do take a lot of things into consideration. For students that are receiving need-based grant aid, there are 3 different tiers of funding. The first is a 75% tuition grant. The second level is 100% tuition grant. And the third is 100% tuition grant plus a $12,000 living expense stipend. And those, we don't give out as many of the 100% plus stipends. Those are really for the students that we determine to be the most financially needy. Things that are important for students to understand is, if there is something that you think we need to know that is not part of the application, it's not a question that we ask, or you have an extenuating circumstance, we would encourage you to fill out your application and then send an email to the financial aid email address, which is financial_aid@hds.harvard.edu. And again, all of this is on our website. Send us an email and tell us what it is that you think we need to know. And if we have follow-up information, follow-up questions, we'll certainly be back in touch with you. But otherwise, we will take the information that you forward us and we will put it towards, put it in your financial aid application, so that in the event that you are admitted, we can look at that information. At HDS, we feel like it's really one of the core values of the school to be giving out as much need-based aid as possible. And so we are looking at financial need when we're giving out the bulk of our money. But it's also important to note that about 90% of our students are getting some sort of institutional grant support, either from the merit-based program or through the need-based program. So we have very few students that are actually paying the full cost of tuition. And I always recommend do your budget and sort of make your plans based on hoping that you're going to end up with a 75% grant. And then if you get something more, or you get a merit award, then you end up in a much better financial position. But I think this is also a great opportunity for students to take some time and, research the areas that you're applying to. Think about, what does it cost to live there? Think about how you feel about debt, and will you need to take on student debt, or do you have some of your own means, and how will you contribute to your application? It's super important that you apply on time by the February 9th deadline, because if you don't apply on time, in the event that you don't get offered merit aid, we automatically look at students for need-based aid. And if you miss the deadline and don't apply until after you've been admitted, then there often are times when we don't have any aid to offer at that point. And you would have to go on a wait list for funding. In many years, we can't go to that wait list for funding. So it's important that you apply online. The FAFSA takes a couple of business days to process. So we do recommend that you do that a few days before the deadline, so that we do have it by the 9th. If for some reason we don't have it by the 9th, if you did it on the 7th, if we get it a day or so after, it's not a big deal. But if there are delays or reasons why you can't complete the application online, please be in touch with us so that we understand what's going on. We will also send you missing information letters from the time that we send out the first award notification, the first email notification about applying for aid. We will send out notifications reminding you what still needs to be submitted. If you continue to get emails from us, it means that we don't have something from you. Or if you've never gotten an email from us, I would say if you haven't heard from us at all by the end of January, you want to be in touch with us. And also please check your spam folders, because sometimes our emails do go there. And you want to make sure that you're submitting the information so that you can be considered for the maximum amount of aid. When you fill out the FAFSA, you want to make sure that you're choosing Harvard Divinity School, and our school code is E00210. If you check the drop box for the generic Harvard school code, that will go to Harvard College and we will never see your FAFSA. So it's really important that you choose Harvard Divinity School and our school code. And again, that's on our website. We want to make sure that we get your information so that in the event that you are admitted, we can go ahead and award you. I also think it's important to note that your admissions is need blind, which means no one on the admissions committee knows if you're applying for financial aid. They don't have access to any of your financial aid records. So whether or not you need aid does not factor into whether or not you're going to be admitted. So I think that's an important distinction to make. Another question that we got was about what does it cost to attend HDS? And so I would recommend that you take some time and look at our website, because we do have all the costs listed on our website about the tuition and fees. But I'll quickly go over some of the categories. It's important to note that this is for the current school year of the 22-23 school year. We have not made final cost of attendance calculations for 23-24, but we certainly will have that in place prior to sending out award letters. So tuition for HDS is currently $30,472. That's full-time. And that tuition has not been raised in a couple of years. If it were to be raised, it would be probably a very slight increase. The Blue Cross Blue Shield, which is the University Health Services, that's the individual health insurance plan, that's $4,080. The University Health Services fee, which is $1,304, that is if you get sick on campus and need to see a doctor. It also covers your counseling and mental health services. And again, that's $1,304 for the academic year. We have a small activities fee of $70 for the year. All of that goes directly to our student organizations to support their programming. And then, so those are the direct costs that a student would be billed. And then there are estimates of what we think it will cost for food, housing, books, miscellaneous. Food, we estimate about $5,043 for the year. Housing, $14,575. Books, $1,004. Miscellaneous is $5,219. So our total cost of attendance for 22-23 is $61,767. I do also want to mention that the Blue Cross Blue Shield, which is the individual health insurance fee, that can be waived in the event that you have your own health insurance, and you will continue to be covered under that plan while you're in school. So we have, for example, either students that are under 26 and can continue to be covered under a parental plan, or perhaps they're married and the spouse is able to cover them under their plan. You can waive that as long as the plan is equivalent to what the school plan is. And if you waive that, we just deduct that from your cost of attendance. As you can see, it's a pretty bare bones cost of attendance. And for us, it's a 9-month budget because we don't enroll over the summer. Summer is not an official period of enrollment. We do have a small summer language program, but we don't offer student loans for that. And so we can't include the summer months in the cost of attendance. So I think that covers the first couple of questions that we were asked. Another question that we were asked was, I work full-time and don't have savings or a family who can pay for school. I'm wondering how one manages the cost of school. I need to work and the demands of being a student, which seems to me to be a full-time job in itself. Is there a way through that doesn't leave me a substantial financial debt? So that's a pretty big question. And a lot of that will vary from person to person. Certainly, we do have some students that either have very high need or they end up getting an merit award, and it allows them to come out of here with a lot less debt, particularly if they have some of their own resources. But if you don't have any of your own resources and you don't have any family support, depending upon the grant package that you get, it may not be possible to make all of your necessities meet all of your needs without some form of borrowing. We do have students that work. We typically recommend that students keep working to about 10 to 20 hours per week. On occasion, we do have some students who work more like 30 hours a week, but those are typically people that have gone to school full-time and work full-time and know that they can handle that. I would not recommend making a budget and a plan with working 30 hours a week and starting a new graduate program if you've never done that before. Because what happens is if you've built your budget on that, and then it turns out that either you can't handle that level of working, or you can't find a job that will offer you that many hours with the amount of money that you feel like you need to make, you're already going to start off in a financial deficit, and you're going to start your program off on unsettled financial ground, which what we often find causes a lot of stress for students. We have many students that work on campus, either through the federal work study program, or for students that either don't have eligibility for work study. Work study is a need-based program, meaning you have to have financial need. So not all of our students would be eligible for work study, but many will. But we also have an on-campus work program for students that don't have work study as well. With work study, there is a cap in the amount that a student can work, because the university gets an allocation of work study for the academic year, and that gets split amongst all of the schools at Harvard, and HDS gets a portion of that. And so in order to get as many students working as possible, we limit the maximum amount that students can make under work study to $6,000 for the academic year. And that typically will work out to about 10 to 12 hours a week. The rate of pay will vary depending upon where you're working. Some students are making $15 an hour, or a little less working at a library. If you're working in an office as a graduate student, oftentimes the pay is more in the $18, $19, $20 range. So it really depends on where you get a job as to how much you'll be making. But it is not realistic to think that you're going to be able to cover all of your living expenses simply by doing a work study job. So I think it's important to keep that in mind. What's great about doing work study is you can work anywhere throughout the university. If there's something at the Kennedy School, or one of the the School of Public Health, or the law school, if you find a job that you're interested in, you're welcome to apply there. And then if you get hired, then you come back to us and we award your work study at that point. We don't pre-package work studies, so your first award letter will never have work study eligibility on it. We want to make sure that we're giving it to students that actually intend to get an on-campus job. International students are not eligible for federal work study, nor are undocumented students. But again, you certainly can still work on campus as an international student and as a DACA, as a undocumented student. If you have DACA, you're able to work on campus as well. International students have to be very careful about making sure you don't exceed those 20 hours a week, because that's a stipulation of your visa. So you do want to make sure that you're keeping 20 hours or below. In periods when we're not enrolled, say for over the holiday break or in the summers, students can work more hours as long as their offices can accommodate it. You could work up to 40 hours, but you also have to keep within whatever your work study allocation is. If you're not in a work study position, you're not kept to a certain allocation, but you don't have as much selection of positions, because not every office at Harvard can hire a student that doesn't have work study. Many of the offices are hiring students with work study because it's a budget savings for them. They're only paying about 25% of what the student is making, and the Department of Education is picking up the other 75%. If a student doesn't have work study or has exceeded their work study allocation, then the department is paying 100% of what that student's making. So again, it doesn't mean that you can't get a job on campus. If you don't have work study, it just means you won't have the same level of selection. I also want to say that when we are not in a period of a pandemic, we generally don't have a problem with students finding work study positions if they cast a wide net. I rarely do we have students come and say, I want to find a work study position, but there are no jobs available, or I can't find anything I'm interested in. So there are a large number of opportunities out there. You just have to cast a wide net. And what would happen is once you're admitted in March, you would have access, and actually after March. Once you're admitted and then get your information for your Harvard ID and your PIN number, then you would be able to check the student employment website and look for all of the opportunities. But you can't start working until September, because you're not considered a fully matriculated student until then, because summer is not a period of enrollment for us. Even if you do summer language, you can't start student employment, at least work study, until the fall. Another question that was asked is, between direct financial aid and student employment opportunities, how much of the total cost of a degree with HDS is covered? And again, that's going to vary greatly based on your package. But I think it's important to note that we do not have a program that is going to fully cover anyone's cost of attendance, all with grant aid. So you're not going to get $61,767 worth of grant aid. Even our best package, which would be a full tuition grant and a $20,000 stipend, is only going to end up in about the $50,000 range. And we certainly don't offer as many of the $20,000 stipends as we do some of the lower stipends. So I think it's important to note that there's going to be some additional funds that are going to be required. How much of that will depend on what your grant package is. I think this is also a fantastic time to start thinking about how you feel about debt, and really asking yourself like hard questions about whether or not do you have previous debt? Do you plan to go on to other programs that would require you to borrow? How do you feel about debt overall? Because I think that's a question that students don't ask themselves until after they've committed to taking out loans. So I think it's really important that you sort of do a gut check at this point and think about how much feels like too much, and am I going to get the return on my investment? Does it make sense to borrow this level of debt? We have some students that borrow very significantly, and we have some students that don't borrow at all. But it really varies from individual situation to individual situation. So I think it's really worth your time to think hard and long, not just about HDS, but any program that you're considering applying to, and making sure that you sort of understand what the options are, that you know what the deadlines are, and that you're putting yourself in the best possible place to get as much aid as possible. The other thing I want to mention about our cost of attendance is what we estimate for food and housing, miscellaneous expenses, and books are an estimate. We think they're a good faith estimate. We're required by the Department of Education to provide that information and have it be pretty realistic, but it's also important to keep in mind that we have some students that live for much more than that and some that live for much less than that. And our housing is based on a student living with at least one roommate and living in the Cambridge area, not necessarily in Cambridge. We don't have a lot of leeway in areas that we can increase the cost of attendance, but one of the places that we can increase for is housing. So if there were a particular reason why you needed to be in specific housing that was a little bit more costly, we could certainly have a conversation about whether or not we could look to do a professional judgment and increase there. And also, if you're coming with a family and you obviously need a larger apartment, we can certainly talk about increasing for that as well. We also will increase for one-time moving expenses and computer-related purchases as well. You can do that once during your program. Actually, I think that clears up most of the questions that have already been asked. So I'd love to open it up in the Q&A. If anybody has any additional questions that they'd like to ask, please go ahead and put those in now. While we're waiting to see if any questions pop up, I do want to really encourage you to be in touch with our office if you have questions, if you have concerns. I think the biggest mistake that students make is they make assumptions about what will or will not happen, and sometimes those assumptions are not accurate. So if there is something that you're worried about or something that you think is a specific way that, please be in touch with us, and we're happy to sort of talk you through things. We can talk in person if you're in the area, but we can always set up a Zoom conference, or we can certainly talk on the phone. What we can't do is tell you specifically what we think your package will be. And I know everyone would love to know that before applying, but we're certainly happy to have conversations either, on the phone, through Zoom, in person, and certainly through email. Okay. If I receive a scholarship from an institution unrelated to Harvard, can I still apply for financial aid? Yes, that's a great question. You can certainly still apply for financial aid. We do, once you have confirmed that you're receiving that scholarship from someplace else, we do need to know about it. At HDS, what we do is we take that scholarship and we try to count it first towards your unmet need, which means anything that's not already covered by your need-based scholarship. And then if we have to reduce some of the aid that you've been offered, we try to reduce first loans, then work study. And then if we had to reduce anything, we would look at your HDS grant. The only caveat to that is if you come in with a really large outside scholarship and say, for example, get a very large scholarship from HDS, there may be some reduction of the HDS funds. So we would certainly talk to you about that before we make any of those changes. But we try not to, I know a lot of times students will get $1,000 scholarship or a $5,000 scholarship. And in many cases, that doesn't displace any of the aid that HDS is offering you. If you have a specific scholarship that you already know that you've been awarded and you have questions about that, shoot us an email and we can sort of answer that now if it's possible. But certainly we would very much encourage students to look for outside resources. We do have a very small listing on our website of outside scholarships that we're aware of, but we would encourage you to, cast a much wider net, reach out to social organizations, your alma maters, faculty that are in your area of focus, talk to them about where they have found some funding, because that will certainly help you reduce your dependence on student loans. Another question, when we fill out our HDS institutional application, will we be asked to fill out any amount of previous student debt that we have from other programs we've attended, or maybe even the student debt that our parents will be paying? So we will actually, if you're a US citizen or an eligible non-citizen, we will have access to your FAFSA, which will tell us what your federal student loan debt balance is. So anything that you borrowed for federal loans will show up on your FAFSA. So that would be Perkins loans. It would be your Stafford loans, both graduate and undergraduate. And if you had borrowed graduate plus loans for a previous program, we would have access to that as well. If you have private loans that are not federally funded, so let's say you had some federal loans, but then you also borrowed some private loans, we do actually ask that on the institutional application. So we would ask you to tell that. You only want to fill that out if they're not federal loans. And we actually say that. So if you have a private loan that you borrowed from a Nelnet or a Sallie Mae, that's in addition to your federal student loans, or you didn't borrow federal student loans and you only borrowed private loans, make sure that you put that in the institutional application. We do not ask for parental loan information. So if a parent borrowed a plus loan for you for undergrad, we don't ask that information. And that actually brings up another good point, which is that when you're filling out the FAFSA and the institutional application, because this is a graduate program, you are only listing your own and a spouse, if you have one, financial information. So we're not looking at parental information. We're just looking at your income and assets and spouse's income and assets if you have that. When you fill out your income and assets, it's also important that we don't ask for retirement assets, because we know if you have a 401k or a 403b or an IRA, we know that you can't touch those without really significant penalties. So we don't ask for that, but we do ask for real estate, rental properties, if you have trusts, cash checking, savings, things like that. We ask about that. But we don't ask for your parental information. On the flip side, sometimes students will ask us, like sometimes a family member was planning to help you when their financial situation changes, and then they ask us to change the award that we've offered them. And unfortunately, we can't go back and make a change based on a family change because we never took that into consideration in the first place. But we certainly do look at the individual student's debt. Are there some required essays to write in filling out the HDS application? No, we do not require you to fill out essays. It's a lot of yes or no questions or fill in the blank about financial information. But, you know, there are some schools where you're actually applying for their merit awards. You have to submit an application for that, and that's not the case here. Our admissions committee will make their decisions on the strength of the overall application for the merit awards, and then we're basing the need-based awards based on the financial information that you're filling out. So there are no essay questions or anything like that. Someone had asked that they're traveling and won't be in town until February and wanted to know what docs will be needed to fill out in the application. And are there any specific docs that you'll need to attach with the application? So to fill out the FAFSA, you will need to use your 2021 tax return. You do have the option for the FAFSA to do the IRS data retrieval, and we highly recommend that you do that. If you do use the data retrieval tool, then that will allow the IRS to populate your tax information, and you shouldn't really need anything much beyond that, except for what your current balances are for your assets. So if you can do the IRS data retrieval, that's great. Some students don't qualify for it. Maybe you didn't file a tax return, so you can't do that. Or if you're changing your filing status, like oftentimes people that were married one year and not married another, they can't automatically pull the tax return that way. So if you have a copy of your 2021 taxes, that would be very helpful for you to be able to fill out. But it is important that you fill it out. These are online applications. So we've had students in very remote, very far off places that were still able to complete the application on time. So hopefully that shouldn't be an issue for it. But if you do run into issues, please be in touch with us. And you know, if we can work around it, we will. Also, if something comes up, you know, a few days before the deadline and something happens, something very unexpected that's going to keep you from making the deadline, be in contact with us. Also, if you think you submitted your FAFSA months before and we still don't have it, that's a good time to also contact us to make sure that we have it, because sometimes students fill out their institutional their FAFSA with the wrong social security number, they transcribe a number, or oftentimes they'll put a wrong social security number on their admissions application. And when the FAFSA comes in, it doesn't match up with the record. Those are easily fixable things, but we would need a student to be in touch with us to get that rectified. Does the health insurance estimates in the table cover all health expenses? What if the student sees doctors out of the university? I can't give real detailed information about what the plan covers, but you can certainly go on the Harvard website and type in student health insurance office, and you'll be able to get a lot of information about what is covered and what isn't covered. There are typically the cost of you know, the year-long premiums are what's part of the budget. There certainly will be co-pays for certain things, and there could be additional fees for certain procedures, like they may not cover everything out of pocket, but I wouldn't have up-to-date information about that. So I would very much recommend, if you're admitted to the program and considering coming, when you're in that decision period, You'll get lots of information from a lot of offices at HDS, and that will include information from the Student Health Insurance Office about what's covered and what isn't. But you can, as I said, you can certainly go look at their website now just to get a basic idea. Do international students qualify for the merit-based package? Yes, every student that applies to the MTS or the MDiv program, whether they are international, undocumented, or domestic, they will all be considered for the merit-based packages. But again, it's a very small percentage of students that are being chosen. The large bulk of our funding is coming from the need-based, and international students, undocumented, and domestic students are all welcome to apply for the need-based aid as well. That seems to be all the questions. I'm going to give it another minute. Oh, here comes a new one. Being a U.S. permanent resident, but living outside of the U.S. and not having any tax records, can I still apply for FAFSA? Yes, you can still fill out the FAFSA. And there are generally questions about how to fill it out if you have, if you're earning income outside of the US, that should be addressed in the FAFSA instructions that you can find on the FAFSA website. So yes, you can still certainly fill out a FAFSA. The other thing that worries students is, what if I don't have any income? We have a lot of students that are coming right from undergrad and have only earned maybe a couple $1,000s, maybe not anything at all. That's not alarming to us. A lot of our students are not coming in with very significant asset or income. So that won't be worrisome to us. But you do have to report any income that you did earn. And so if you lived outside of the US and earned income, there will be questions that address how you should fill that out. Does the scholarship cover accommodations? So it depends on the type of scholarship that you're offered. If you're just offered a tuition grant or a portion of tuition, so say, for example, in the need-based, if you're offered a 75% tuition grant, it's only going to cover 75% of your tuition. It will not cover any of your living expenses. If you're receiving 100% tuition, again, it just covers tuition. If you are receiving a need-based stipend or a merit-based stipend, then that money can be used towards covering your living expenses. But it's likely not going to cover everything. So it's important to keep that in mind. So you are going to have to look at other ways to cover that, either through private scholarships, potentially student loans, or your own resources. Oh, this is a great question. Is the financial aid applicable for each year or just the first year? So for merit-based, it's renewable for the length of your program, either 2 or 3 years, as long as you continue to make satisfactory academic progress, meaning you're completing the number of credits that you need per year, and you're making the grades that you need to finish the program and do it on time, and you stay in the program you were admitted to, because merit awards are based on the program that you apply to. So as long as you do that, then you will receive that for the length of the program. Need-based aid, you do have to reapply each year, but typically you're going to receive the same level of grant aid for the length of the program, assuming that you still demonstrate financial need. Unfortunately, we don't increase need-based grants from year to year. We just simply don't have the funds to do that. But if you come in with a 75% grant for year one, you should expect that to receive that for the length of the program. In my almost 17 years that I've been here, I can only think of about maybe 7 instances where someone had a need-based grant, and in the second and or third year, we didn't offer them a grant for those years. And those were cases of someone that either had really significant positive changes to their own financial situation, or married someone that had very significant income and assets. And I'm talking very significant, like in one case, we had someone that inherited real estate that was fully paid off and worth a couple of $1 million. In another case, it was someone that married someone with extraordinary income and assets. So it is possible that your grant could be reduced in the second and or third year of the program, but it's very, very rare. And we would always have a conversation with the student first. We wouldn't just arbitrarily do that, reduce the grant, because we want to make sure that we understand exactly what we're seeing, because it is possible sometimes it's a typo. So we want to make sure that that's the case, rather than penalizing the student off to begin with. So, but on the flip side, we don't increase for years 2 and 3 of the program. So if you come in with 75%, that's typically what you're going to see. We do not award merit in second or third years of the program. So if you are not offered a merit when you are admitted to the degree program, you will not receive a merit for the length of the program here. And it's also, I think it's important to note here that HDS does not negotiate grant aid. If there's something that we didn't know, you certainly should tell us about it once we do the award, because sometimes there is something that we weren't aware of. But generally, a lot of students will get a different award from another school and ask us to meet that award, and we don't do that. Part of that is because we don't feel, in order to negotiate awards, we would have to hold money back on the front end, and we just don't feel like that's the right thing to do. We make our awards, we give you what we think we have, the best package we have to offer, and then we ask you to make a decision based on all the information you have from other schools. We don't want to hold back money on the off chance that you might get a different award from someplace else. Because what if you don't ever come back to us and ask us to negotiate it? You could be leaving money on the table. We just don't think that's the right thing to do. So what we do is we go out with the best package that we have to offer you, and understand that sometimes you might have an offer from a better offer, not from a better school, because who's better than Harvard Divinity School? But honestly, you may have a more substantial financial offer from another school, and we understand that, but we are not able to meet it. Any reminder for international students for the financial aid form fill out? I'm not entirely sure what that means, but we do send reminders to all students that have submitted an admissions application, and we will send you a reminder about what information is still outstanding, and give you an opportunity to fill it out up until the deadline. The other thing that I should note is on February 9th, we don't have a specific cutoff. We don't shut the application off at 5 o'clock, but we're also not here after 5 o'clock. So if you have technical problems, we won't be there to answer them after 5 o'clock. So I don't recommend waiting until February 9th to fill out the form for the first time. There's almost always an issue. Someone will have an issue submitting something. So I always recommend that you plan to do these a couple of days before they're due, just to make sure that everything gets submitted on time. That seems to be all the questions. I'll give it just another minute in case anything else comes up, but I do want to reiterate that if you do have questions or concerns, or if there was something that you didn't understand, or something that we didn't cover, or something that you just didn't feel comfortable putting into the chat, please feel free to send us an email. That's the best way to reach us. We are in the office, but we do some remote work as well. So the fastest way to contact us is through our email. And again, Margaret put that in the chat, but it's financial_aid@hds.harvard.edu. And we are happy to answer questions and set up appointments that way. Besides the deadline, any other things we should keep in mind when filling out the form? When you're filling out the HDS application, make sure that you're filling out all of the required lines. There are a number of questions that are required. And if you try to submit and it won't let you submit, there's about a 95% chance that you missed a question. Oftentimes someone says, say, for example, one of the questions we ask is, do you have home equity? Like, what's your home equity? What was the price of your home? If you didn't own a home and you don't owe anything on it, if that question doesn't apply to you, just put a 0 in it. If you leave it blank, it won't let you submit the application. So make sure that you're just filling out all the questions that we're asking you. But that's really the only thing I can think of. Also on the FAFSA, again, aside from putting in the school code, which is the E00210, you also want to make sure that you're checking off that you are in a graduate degree program and that you're looking for a graduate degree, because sometimes we have students that say they answer that they're getting an undergraduate degree when they're really getting a graduate degree. So we want to make sure that you're answering those questions correctly, because we'll have to go back and correct them. And then also, if you were married after the 2021 school year, on the FAFSA and on the institutional application, you will still have to tell us your spouse's information as well. So on the FAFSA, you'll have to add your adjusted gross income and their adjusted gross income, and then add their assets to your assets. And on the institutional form, you'll add their assets to your assets as well. So keep that in mind. Owning a home means assets our parents own. No, we do have some students that own their own homes. Sometimes we have students that come, you know, they're changing careers, or they're just coming a little bit later in life and own their own home. We don't want your parents' assets. If your parents own a home, you should not put your parents' information on there. It's only your information. If you own a home, you should put what you owe, you know, what the purchase price was, what the debt was, you know, what you still owe on it, what the value is. But we do not want your parental information. So please don't do that. Another thing, actually, a good question about when you're filling out the forms, we do ask you to tell us about your household size, and you should only include yourself and anyone else that's a dependent or receives more than 50% of their financial support from you. So if you live with your parents, but you're a graduate student, don't put your parents down in the household size, just list yourself. If you're married, put yourself and your spouse and any dependent children. If there is another family member that you support and provide more than 50% of their financial support, you certainly should list them in the household size. But if you're living with roommates, don't include your roommates, just list yourself. Okay, I think that's it at this point. I really want to thank you all for your time and attention. I hope that this session was helpful. If there, again, anything else that comes up, please don't hesitate to be in contact with our office. We're happy to answer any questions. We wish you the very best in your application process. And if there's anything we can do to help you, we certainly are looking forward to doing anything we can to answer these questions for you. And again, please feel free to be in touch, and best of luck in your search for graduate schools. Bye-bye.